Okay, I'll call this meeting to order. Wednesday, July 1st, 2020, at 6:30. New Shoreham Town Council's meeting via telecommunication pursuant to the State of Rhode Island Executive Order 2046, dated June 12th, 2020. We will be going into closed session discussion to discuss an act on a memorandum of agreement between the town of New Shoreham, Rhode Island, and New Shoreham Employees Association, Local 2855, Rhode Island Council 94, AFSCME, AFL-CIO. Discussion will be held in closed session pursuant to Rhode Island General Law 4246A2, 4246(5)(a)(2). Sessions pertaining to collective bargaining or litigation, or work sessions pertaining to collective bargaining or litigation. As I said, we'll be going into closed session as soon as we vote to do so. Those on the open session can stand by, and we will come out of the closed session and resume the open meeting at 7 o'clock. So I'll make a motion to go into closed session.
Second.
Seconded by Andre. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Andre?
Aye.
Sven? Aye. Chris?
Aye.
Martha?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0, go into closed session. Thank you, everyone. Like I said, if you're in the open session, please stand by. This is, we're going into closed session, so we'll sign off and go into our closed session meeting.
Hey, Laura, if there's any more of the dinner left,
Ben,
I
you're on streaming.
oh, I am.
Are you going into the closed session?
Oh, I thought I was. Okay, sorry. I'll close out. Thank you.
You're welcome. Molly, you're on streaming.
Not talk because you're.
I am here. This is Martha. I am here.
Michelle, would you like to make me a co-host so I can rename Martha? Or not?
I've got her, but I will add you. Dr. Workup, we're on streaming. We are waiting for the council to join.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I know that number.
Molly, you ready to start?
I think we're waiting for, the chief is having a little trouble coming in.
Okay.
The chief's having technical difficulties. He asks that you call him if you need him and put him on speakerphone.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
All right, I'll call the meeting to order. Good evening, everyone. This is the town council meeting, Town of New Shoreham, for Wednesday, July 1st, 2020. We're now starting the open session meeting. Town of New Shoreham's meeting via telecommunication pursuant to the state of Rhode Island Executive Order 2046 dated June 12th, 2020. The Zoom access has been distributed via ClerkBase, via the town council's website. Comments were able to be sent in before the meeting to town clerk at new-shoreham.com. Joining us this evening, we do have the basically the town council, Second Ward Nande Boudreaux, town councilman Sven Reesum, town councilor Chris Willey, town councilor Martha Ball, interim town manager Jim Kern, and town solicitor Catherine Marola, as well as some other personnel. We also have some people who've signed up and will be able to speak during the meeting once they raise their hand. Just a reminder for everyone, if you are called upon to speak during the meeting, it is by, as a normal council meeting would be, it's not an open table discussion. It is, you call on to speak, you speak, and then you will be, you can mute yourself for the time being. It's not a rolling discussion. Conversation will be through the chair. First item on the agenda will be to announce that we were in closed session prior to this meeting. And during that closed session meeting, I will announce there was a unanimous vote to approve a memorandum of agreement between the town of New Shoreham and the New Shoreham Employees Association, Local 2855, Rhode Island Council 94, AFS-CME, AFL-CIO. So that was approved, the memorandum of agreement. The next item on the agenda is a warden's report. Here we are halfway through the year, and one thing of significance, I think, out there, just one thing is that the sidewalks have been completed from Smuggler's Cove over to Champlin's. That's almost a monumental achievement. We've been waiting years for that to happen. It certainly makes it a much safer way to walk between those two locations. I did have a conversation this week with the manager for the power company and asked him to take a look at the lighting situation for that particular stretch of road. And he was going to be looking to make any minor adjustments that might be needed to make it more safe at night to walk over there, given the fact that there's now a concrete sidewalk. So, but a job well done, I think, by the Cardi crew. We interrupted them, as you know, through the COVID-19, so they had to remobilize to come out to finish it. But with Jim Jeremy cracking the whip, I think they got the job done. And with Joe Sprague's help and other island contractors, they did a great job. I think it's going to be a wonderful improvement over there. I'll also mention that the town continues to communicate many times a week, usually 3 times a week, but if not more often, with members of the governor's staff and members of the various offices, such as DBR and Commerce and Department of Health and EMA. Numerous town officials communicate with them on a almost daily basis with any concerns we might have relative to the COVID-19 pandemic. They've been very helpful, and they continue to be, and we appreciate their support and anything they've been able to do for us. And we continue to work with them as much as possible to keep the island safe. And that segues into, I see Dr. Warkup is on. I want to thank him for the video updates that he's been providing. I noticed another one that was released today with a lot of good information in it. And we really appreciate that. We suggest that anyone who's interested, make sure they check that out. Dr. Warkup, that's available on the Health Services website. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Like I said, we appreciate your insight and your information that you're giving us, and we'll keep a positive thought. And while we're on the medical center, I did see an announcement this week that longtime favorite island nurse Linda Kloster will be retiring soon, and there will be a time to review the accolades and the appreciation for her, but just suffice it to say at this point, she will be missed at such a time when she does retire. But we certainly wish her well and hope that she'll be able to enjoy that retirement with all the grandkids and whatnot. So I don't have anything else at this point. Andre, do you have anything, Second Warden?
No, thank you, Ken. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda would be any public input anyone has, if anyone is signed on to do any public input at this time. Looks like I have a Bill McComb.
Yeah, Ken, I received a call from EMA today saying that the governor has provided 1,000 masks to each town to be distributed through the EMA director. What I thought I'd do is get those to the chief or the CEOs for the project you have in town with handing the masks out, unless you want them directed elsewhere.
No, that'd be fine. Actually, what they were doing is I believe they were disseminating them with for other towns anyway, 500 to EMA and 500 to the police department themselves. But I think with the police providing the service for disseminating the mass. I think it'd be good to just go to there. Sven, would you agree?
Yes.
Great. Yeah, that's great, Bill. Thank
Great.
you. Did get confirmation.
Great.
Go ahead.
Yeah, they're arriving tomorrow. They're going to ship them over. They're going to drop them off to me at the ferry tomorrow, so I'll get them up to the police department. Thank you.
Outstanding. Thank you. Anything further for anyone? If not, we'll move right along into the first item on the agenda. And the first item on the agenda is to meet with the Broadband Committee to discuss the island-wide broadband project and funding. The warrant question on upcoming financial town meeting for July 27th, 2020. And representing the Broadband Committee tonight, I believe we have Amy Lewis Land, and I think is that why I saw Ray Torrey's name? Ray, are you on also? Just lost my screen.
Yes, I'm on the call. However, I'm listening in, and whatever Amy can't fill in, I'll try my best. But I know that she will handle most of our business tonight.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ray. Oh, I see what's happening. Okay.
I believe the presentation's up.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Sven. Okay, Amy, I turn it over to you if you don't mind.
Sure. And thank you. As you said, I'm going to do a lot of the talking just because this format doesn't necessarily allow for everyone to participate as freely as we usually do. But I am here on behalf of the entire Broadband Committee: Ray Torrey, Lucinda Morrison, Stephen Record, Kathy Zabo, Christine Monge, and then myself, Sam Bird, Michelle Spiro, representing the staff. And what we have for you tonight is a presentation that is on the clerk base as well for anyone who would like to find it. But it's not a marketing presentation, so we're not going to talk too much tonight about why we need broadband, but more on the high level specifics of the design, implementation, and pricing of the project that the Broadband Committee is bringing to the Town Council in the hope that the Council will bring it forward to the voters in July. And so with that, if we want to move to page and talk a little bit about what the network will actually provide. It's a fiber to the premise network with fiber connections to all residents and businesses. They'll run just like other utility services above underground or aerial, depending on how you receive those connections today. The project includes an indoor NTE or network termination equipment that also comes with power protection, backup UPSs for all subscribers. There's back-end electronics and systems to support the network operations. Those are there to ensure a high-quality customer experience. It was definitely a priority when we put out the RFP and evaluated the responses that we'd be bringing to customers a very high-quality customer experience, so that the frustrations that many of us have felt in our telecommunications life dealing with Verizon and other providers isn't replicated with this network. That was definitely a priority as we put this together. Knowing that people have different needs and that those needs keep changing over time, there are multiple data service options, and we can provide some backup information on what those tiers are. But they range from 25 to 1 gig symmetric service, depending on what each household or business's needs are. There's also an optional telephone component, which includes E911. And a little bit unique for Block Island would be a connectivity that maintains an on-island phone network if we were to lose mainland connectivity. For those people who may do even more with their internet, businesses working from home, businesses who are looking to build a particularly robust online presence, there are services like static IP addresses, that are available. We can talk again about those a little bit separately since they're not something most people are going to be using. But we also have some unique services for customers like the hotels who may want to be redistributing that service to their customers. Again, sort of niche products that we won't focus on too much today, but those are available in the program that's being put forward. And then the last characteristic that I want to call your attention to is the FCC Lifeline program, which is support for low-income customers. And we're still learning the details and the nuances of this program, but our understanding today is that it's based on the same criteria as the school lunch program, which we do have a lot of familiarity with, and so would benefit a fair number of our year-round residents. That characteristic is a requirement of our participation in the FCC RDOF program, and we'll talk about that towards the end. But even if the town were not a successful bidder in that RDOF program, we could still elect to implement a similar program if we chose to. But so that's a new sort of concept that we're layering into this program. Ken, it's probably best maybe if I stop after each and see if the council has any questions, or should I go straight through?
Sure. No, we can stop if you like, and that way they don't have to retract. Does anyone have any questions on that in particular? I'm not, there again, I've got that on my screen, so I'm scrolling up and down. If someone has something, they can raise their hand if it'd be helpful. Yeah, Sven Reeser, go ahead.
Amy, you mentioned the optional online phone service, quote unquote, on-island phone service. Is that just for on-island dialing? I want to make sure the clarity of the words, or is that a regular phone capability that's through the internet?
It is a regular phone capability through the internet. However, as a backup system, because of the way the network is constructed, and Michelle may jump in here in a minute, because of the way the network is constructed, in the event that you did lose connectivity to the mainland, that the on-island component would still function.
Chris,
So it's not.
Sven, did you have a follow-up?
Go ahead, Amy.
It's not quite like the old days where you only had to dial the last 4 digits. We're not quite going back there, but it is a fail-safe in the event of emergency.
But could one use that instead of any other phone service they may have for a landline?
Absolutely. So this could replace your current Verizon service.
Or if we don't have a phone because it's such poor service, we would now have access to a phone for the house?
That's correct.
Just making sure that's clear. Thank you.
Chris Willie?
Amy, is the data service, the options is going to be a tiered enrollment, meaning y'all have a choice, or is that what's available in certain areas?
No, it's not geographic specific. So there are, I believe, five general tiers ranging from 25 up to 1 gig symmetric, and you can choose and move between those services at your choice.
Okay, and those will be, yeah, no, that's what I mean. There's going to be a price structure associated with the tier like there would be now with different communication services and whatnot. So, okay.
Correct. We thought a lot about that, in that some communities are offering just a single tier of service, 1 gig, which comes with a price that some of our customers may not need or be willing to pay. If you're a very moderate user and primarily emailing, you don't need that and you don't want to pay for it, and we're not going to make you.
Well, that's why I'm asking, because we have people now that still use dial-up and they probably don't want to pay for a full gig. So thank you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Sven, you have your hand up again? No? Okay. Bill McComb, you have your hand up?
No, Ken, I don't.
Okay. Could you put it down? Thanks.
I didn't. Ken, I haven't touched my phone.
Okay.
Ken?
Yes, Martha, go ahead.
I just want to make it clear for the record that even I do not have dial-up anymore. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions on this page? Yeah, hearing none, go ahead, Amy. Thank you. Move on.
Sure. So let's move on to a little bit of a reminder of where we are in the process. We did go out through an RFP bid and have responses in hand and have selected or identified, but not awarded, obviously, a contract to the vendor team of Surtex and Crocker, which means we have hard numbers in hand. These are not estimates. These aren't maybe it will be a little bit more. These are hard numbers, and it's a design that has been and continues to be refined. Surtex is the builder of broadband networks. They serve a number of municipalities, and they were the contractors who built the CAI network here on the island last year. Crocker Communications is the telecommunications end of this partnership. They have several municipal customers and really have a focus on that customer service that we felt was so important. And as I said, they are becoming very well known in the municipal space in serving customers like Block Island who are owning and developing their own networks. But this network will continue to be owned by the town. It'll be operated and maintained through a contract with Surtex and with Crocker. And it'll continue to be overseen by the town through the town council and the broadband committee. And we'll account for it as a part of the town of New Shoreham as an enterprise fund, just like the sewer or the water, which means that after construction, we would expect that rates offset the cost of that network. There wouldn't be additional taxpayer support or other support required for the system. And to that end, in the economics that we've built already, we've included things like a capital equipment replacement program so that we have the assets necessary to maintain the network and keep it operating at its peak levels. All that's left now is the authorization to move forward to secure the funding.
So that authorization meaning the financial town meeting?
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions on that page? Anyone?
So we can move ahead to the next slide and talk about what will it cost the individual, either as a taxpayer or a customer or both, and how that may compare to what you have today. This is not meant to show everyone's experience. I think I need to say that a couple times. It's meant to be representative of a single household, and every household is going to go through that exercise of evaluating their current services, what they have, what they cost, and their future services, what they need, and what those are going to cost, so that they can understand their unique apples to apples comparison. We can certainly help with that exercise if people have questions about what it would look like for them, but we can't fit them all on a page all the time. So this is one view. That left-hand column that you see would be someone who has currently a DSL service and a local phone component, and may also subscribe to DirecTV or some other satellite TV system. If you don't have DirecTV, then you're looking at the two bottom boxes for DSL and voice, which may cost you about $90, $91 a month. If you only have DSL, it may cost you about $73 a month. Again, your cost may be slightly higher or slightly lower, but this is pretty consistent with the customers that we've surveyed. So for a lot of people, that's what they're seeing today. When you talk about this new network and what it might cost that same household, I think my slides jumped ahead. Well,
there you go.
There they are. We're going to move to the middle column and first talk about the top three boxes. That's where you're going to replicate a local phone service or an internet phone service. That's where you're going to replicate your broadband costs. In this model, we're showing 50 up, 50 down service, which again, for most households and small businesses is going to be sufficient. Some people may want more, some people may want less, and the pricing adjusts accordingly. And then the network O&M. at $32 a month. This is going to be costs that are meant to recover charges to the town for network operations, for transport, for additional costs related to the network. But all three of those are going to show up on a monthly bill from Crocker. So where you used to pay $73 for DSL to Verizon a month, now you'll pay $82 a month to Crocker for those three services: the phone, the broadband, and the O&M. What's unique or not quite so comparable is the bottom box of that middle column, and that's the tax component. Because we have to build this network and it's not being paid for by Crocker and Surtex, it's being paid for by the town, we have a tax component. And the broadband committee spent a great deal of time and consideration working through different cost models, and ultimately settled on an approach where the infrastructure costs to connect to each premise are recovered through the tax base. What we're showing here is a property owner with about $1 million of property value, and their monthly bill component of that tax cost is $23 a month. The town is not going to send a bill for $23 a month. That's going to be included in your annual tax bill, but paid to the town of New Shoreham. In order to allow people to compare monthly cost to monthly cost, we've shown it here in this way. So the tax of $23 a month paid to the town of New Shoreham, plus the $82 a month aggregate paid to Crocker for the telephone, 50 up, 50 down, and broadband, and the network O&M costs, for a total of $105. If, going back to the left column, you've dropped your DirecTV and you choose to add streaming services that you don't already pay for, you would add that to the 105. You may already pay for them and it's not an additional cost, or maybe you decide that you want to keep your DirecTV and you need to add $92 to that. As I said, it's going to be different for every household, but hopefully this is a foundation that people can work with and see how their particular situation would flesh out. Going back to that last lower box, the tax box with the $23, you'll see a hash marked area that hopefully shows up. That area represents the potential offset of the RDOF program. If we were to be successful in securing FCC funding for this project, the RDOF subsidy could be up to $9 a month. That would reduce that tax obligation, reduce the debt service of the town's construction. So we're showing that area sort of grayed out as a potential reduction if we were to be successful, if that makes sense. Moving to the third column there, some people may not want to subscribe to this system, and that's fine. They wouldn't obviously have any monthly costs. They can either keep the service that they have or elect not to have any service. They would still be obligated to participate in the infrastructure costs of the utility. And so that's still the $23 a month, which would be carried forward onto the annual tax bill, again, with the potential offset of those RDOF subsidies at $9 a month. I know there's a lot on this page, so why don't I pause there and see if people have questions or other areas you want to dive into.
Yeah, Amy, I've got a couple points to make. First, on the in the center column, you talked about what that represents, and you did mention that's representing a 50 up and 50 down speed. Can you compare that to what we're experiencing now with the DSL, just for everyone's edification?
Sure, I'm actually going to ask Michelle to do that if she can jump on.
I can. What you're experiencing right now with the typical Verizon DSL is 0.728 download speed and 0.128 upload speed. And that compares to 50 download and 50 upload of the low end service from Crocker.
So we're going from a Volkswagen to a Ferrari.
Pretty much.
Okay. The other question I had, thank you, Michelle. The other question I had was the seasonality of a subscriber, what that might be. For instance, if you have someone who has a house out here and they only live out in that house for 2 or 3 months a year, would they be able to sign on and sign off for the bulk of the services and be able to, prorate it in terms of the seasonality if they wanted to?
To an extent. And I will provide a pricing sheet that afterwards that details both the tiers and some of those seasonal fees for on and off. The pricing system is designed to favor the year-round population, so that what we're showing here, the $30 for broadband, 50 up down, that's with a 2-year contract, and that's going to be your most favorable rate. While people can turn their service on and off, the duration of how long they want to be connected will play into whether that's cost effective for them or not. Just like it might be with Verizon or with Zipco.
And one more question, just to be clear, just for clarification, we're not talking about any hybrid system here. This is actually fiber to each structure, fiber to the home, across the board.
That is correct.
Okay. Sven Riesem?
Amy, a couple of things. You said $23 per month for a $1 million valued house. Is there a curve in that? So let's just say I've got a house that's 600,000. I assume then that would be less than 23. Is that correct?
It's not a curve, it's a linear relationship.
Oh, even better.
Directly proportional. Yep.
So
and that's one reason we use $1 million is because the math is easy. If you have a valuation of 500,000, then you're looking about $11.50 a month.
Thank you. That's important because for those that may not have it. What about renters? How does, if somebody's renting an apartment or, how does that work? Or have you worked that out yet?
Sure. That's, I don't have a definite answer to that today, but that's where the break between the tax component and the subscription component comes in. So that the renter, presumably with the agreement of their landlord, can subscribe to whatever tier is appropriate for them through Crocker, and they would be responsible for those costs, again, depending on their arrangement. It's the landlord who's going to be responsible for the property tax component. So there is a little break there.
And then lastly, as one thinks to Ken's question about seasonal, I look forward to discussing that rate structure, because I think to some degree, if you're just coming in for 3 months, 4 months, having a higher overall monthly rate, yet lower than an annual structure, would be really advantageous for everybody. And then secondly, on that point, I don't know if there's a way to think about year round, a la I may just decide to run it year round, even though I'm only here for 4 months, 3 months, versus year round resident. And if there's a way to tier in that 5th tier, whatever, year round resident, year round subscriber, because they are a bit different.
I will say that we did want to encourage those decisions be made at the customer level, meaning we didn't want to be out there making a distinguishing between whether someone was a year-round resident or not, but that if it was advantageous for them to subscribe consistently for a year or 2 years or longer, that they would make that logical choice. We didn't necessarily want to be in the business of categorizing people.
I
But
understand.
I may have misunderstood your.
No, I understand that hesitation of categorization. I'm trying to think about a year-round resident versus somebody that may have a year-round service or agree to a year-round contract, and they do that because they come out for a week in the winter and they come out for the summer. And that is a very different than as I think about it. That's different than a year-round resident. And so I guess I would encourage one to think about residency, not as a label or not anything else, just as a rate structure. Thank you.
I have a question.
Go ahead,
Ken?
Martha. Yes, Martha.
And I don't know if this is still works this way, but I know at least it used to be that phone service, a lot of people kept their phone service on, well, for a multitude of reasons, some the alarm, but also because just turning it on and turning it off and keeping it inactive to hold on to it, the cost differential was so little. Is that still the case? I just don't know. I'm looking for an analogy.
Okay. Amy, you have a,
I agree that I understood that's how it used to be, but I'm not up on the current process.
Because so many people have shifted over to how they use phones. Yeah.
right.
Thank you.
I will say when it comes to rates in general and structure and prioritization and how you might think about rate policy, what we have here is sort of an initial building block. But just like you talk about water and sewer rates over time, those types of things are within the town's control. If to the extent that we are meeting the obligations of our contracts with Crocker and Surtex, if the town elects to change a pricing structure, there may be room to do that as a sort of public policy process and allocate costs differently. Again, this is sort of the out of the gate structure, but there's always room for adjustment. That's the type of thing the town retains control over. So.
Thank you, Amy. Chris Willie?
I think the comment Sven made earlier, the differentiating between year-round resident and et cetera, I think it's a bad road to go down. We have the majority of our taxpayers don't live here year-round, and this network is going to be built with their dollars, as well as ours that live here year-round. I think the rate structure should be as simple as it can. If people that don't live here year-round want to keep it on year-round, it should be the same as somebody that is living here year-round. I don't want to go down that road. It just complicates and muddies the water. That's it.
All right, Chris. Any further comments or questions? Oh, Amy, going, as you said, someone mentioned something about if you have let's say you have a structure and you have, it's divided, it's a duplex divided into two apartments, if you will. Will that require a double feed, double fiber into the building, or is there a splitter on the receiving end?
Those types of multi-unit arrangements are a little bit, I don't want to say a case-by-case basis, but there's opportunity to share a service if preferred, or provide two different access points if that's preferred. So I think there's room to do what's most appropriate for the arrangements in that site.
Okay, so then the secondary, let's say not the primary inhabitant, but the secondary inhabitant, the renter, if you will, who may not be a property taxpayer, would be basically paying for a different rate?
No, remember your subscription is going to be through Crocker. So if you would like an additional subscription on your parcel, that's fine. If you wanted to have 5 subscriptions on your commercial business, which actually had served 5 different stores, we can break things down in that way.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you. All right.
Yeah.
Any further questions on this page, anyone? Questions or comments? Yeah, Sven Riesman again. Sven, are you there?
Sorry. Sorry about that. Sorry, as you looked at telephone or direct TV versus internet, and they are different given channels and all that. Have you looked at all to a internet-based, a cell phone capability? So a Google Fi, or there's a number of internet-based phones, And I'm thinking about people that have cell phones that could possibly, as another layer, could possibly use this internet for their cell phone service. That's one question. And second, will there be more island-wide access to the internet and high speed if you're not in a home? So let's say you're out in the middle of Hodgeland or somewhere. Will there be any internet access through this system?
No, we're not building at this point a mesh network. We certainly looked at examples of those and considered them, but ultimately decided that wasn't the right, it wasn't the program that we were looking for or prioritizing. Although there are plans for that type of more seamless coverage in sort of the downtown New Harbor area, it's not specified in this program, but it would be a logical expansion down the road. Back to your first question, yes, it's my understanding that if you were looking to use your Wi-Fi network to offset a poor cell coverage, you would be able to do that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Amy. Any other questions on this page? Hearing none, let's move on to the next one. Island-wide broadband, what is a project timeline, right?
Project timeline. It's essentially going to be a 12-month build, is the short, concise answer to that. Between pole make ready and lead time for materials, it won't be 12 months for everyone, but to get the last customer connected. That's about what we're looking at. And you can see the detail here, the final engineering, procurement of the fiber, construction of the backbone, construction of the underground drops, and then finally installation both at the customer end and at the head end. The pole make ready, if you recall, the CAI network is always a bit of a question for us because that depends on Verizon. We know that BIPCO has done great work on that end, and so that does accelerate the process a little bit, but it's a little bit out of our hands. And the other important thing I would note about the timeline is, as it's shown here, it assumes that there's a favorable vote on July 27th, and that vote is not contingent upon the FCC funding. If the town only wanted to move forward with the project, if we're successful in either the FCC funding or other outside subsidies, this timeline slides because you wouldn't be able to start until you knew you were successful, which is going to be early November by the time you had the results of the auction. So then everything slides about 12 months to completion from there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Amy, as you mentioned, the final number, the final date there, July 2nd, is when the last building is hooked up or whatever. Are you saying it's going to be a phased enlightening of the fibers for all the other houses? If you're one of the early ones that's hooked up, you're going to get enlightened?
I think the detail of that March to July final installation is not something I can speak to in any more detail today, but I will work on that and get back to you.
Okay.
Because obviously you see the customer installation is phased. You're not going to bring everyone online at once, but you do need to have that head end installation in order for anyone to be lit. So it's a little bit of a chicken and egg there. My guess is you'll get some people who are installed at the customer side. They'll be able to connect the minute the head end installation is complete. A few more people will need that final household end installation before they can go live.
I guess the other question I would have would be whether or not it was going to be the installation was going to involve a low-hanging fruit strategy, if you will. That we know there's certain buildings or certain residences or certain structures that are going to be really easy to hook up to. You know, just string a line, run a line through a conduit or whatever. But there's going to be others that are going to be a bit more of a challenge, shall we say? And so whether or not they want to go ahead and just do it on a regular coverage basis, or if they want to go ahead and do, well, let's do all the easy ones first and then hit the hard ones on the second phase or something.
I'm not sure it's quite that way. In fact, if you look at the schedule, the underground backbone, which is actually the more challenging, in that you have to do the digging and the micro trenching, actually comes first in sequence, as opposed to the aerial, which, stringing fiber is generally the easier part than the underground installation.
Okay. Yeah, I missed that point. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions for Amy on this page, on this concept of the timeline?
Right. Then we can move ahead to what is the town really asking for at financial town meeting? What are we bringing to the voters for consideration? And what we'd be looking for in this question would be the authorization to borrow up to $8 million. And that's comprised of a couple different things. Just over 7 million of that are non-recurring construction costs, construction of the backbone and implementation. That includes the actual fiber network, the laterals that drop to each premise, the mainland connections. We have a little bit of fiber build to do there. The core equipment, the transport electronics, the equipment that lives in the telecom building here on the island and on the mainland, the pole make ready and construction administration, everything we need to get the actual physical network built. There's another 600,000 of installation costs for the NTEs located at each premise. Those are ultimately recovered through the subscriber rates over time, but we need to be able to acquire those and finance them up front. Same thing with $375,000 of first-year operating costs. Those are ultimately recovered through the subscribers, but we need to be able to operate this network while we're waiting for that initial revenue to come in. So initial installation, administration, things like insurance and pole licensing are all included in that number. What's a little bit different when we say up to 8 million from other projects is that this is really dependent on the number of subscribers. We have 1,700, it's actually 1,684, I think, identified drops, potential subscribers, but we don't think that all of them 100% will actually subscribe, which means you don't need to finance things like the NTEs for those locations. So you're really dependent on the number of initial subscribers in a way that some other project may not be. We've needed to accommodate 100% participation, knowing that it's unlikely that we would actually get 100% participation. The actual take rates, as I said, will determine that final number. The other thing I would note is that there's no minimum take rate for this system to operate. The pricing is not scaled in that way. It's not a curve. So subscription costs are the same, that $20 voice and that $30 broadband for 50 up, 50 down, excuse me, are the same whether the take rate is 60% or 90%. That is good for us in terms of planning, because a lot of communities are really forced with getting a solid take rate before they can move forward with the project, because it's so dependent on whether that number is 60 or 70%. We have a little more flexibility in this, in that the subscription costs, the monthly costs don't change based on the number of subscribers. As I said earlier, the town may decide, and we'll have to decide as we put a question together for the warrant, whether we want to pursue the project in its entirety or to authorize moving forward only contingent upon a successful RDOF auction or successful other outside funding. And that'll be an important consideration as we frame the question for financial town meeting. One of the other things that's just a little bit different, again, is this up to $8 million doesn't consider that RDOF funding because we have to pay the debt service either way, and the RDOF would be an offsetting revenue component. If that number were at its 70% auction rate, which we think is in the $273,000 a year number. That's $2.7 million over 10 years. That's an offset to the $8 million that we're asking for, the up to $8 million, but we can't do an offset on day one. We have to collect that $2.7 million or whatever the final bid number is over 10 years. So again, we would have an immediate identifying offsetting revenue stream, but we have to frame the question in this way. Questions, concerns?
Hearing none, I guess we move on. Oops, Fenris.
Real quickly, Amy, on, I guess, is there any, if you could help us with what does $8 million mean to the town or to a taxpayer, or what that would individually mean, that would help everybody scale it?
Sure. That $8 million ties directly back to that $23 a month number that we saw on the individual pricing page. So that's $276 a year on a property that's valued at $1 million. And if you have that offsetting RDOF, takes that number down to $168 a year, again, for a property valued at $1 million.
Thank you.
So if there are no other questions, we'll move on to what is the RDOF auction. We talked a little bit about this the last time that we met. So just to reiterate, it's an FCC program focused on providing broadband connectivity. It is a 10-year subsidy. It's based on census block groups, which is why all of a sudden this is becoming a viable program for Block Island, because we've been identified as unique geography. As I said, based on prior FCC auction experience, the winning bid could be in the neighborhood of about 70% of the reserve price. Right now, that's looking at about $273,000 annually for Block Island. The auction is in October. But because the financial and performance commitments involved for Surtex and Crocker to bid on those Block Island census groups are very intense, it's necessary that the town commit in advance of the auction to whether or not we're going to do this project. Again, it can be a contingent commitment, but they need to know that we are ready to move forward if they're successful bidders in the auction. I would put a caveat here, which is that the final reserve prices and the final census block groups will be set just prior to the auction, which means when there's always a chance that Surtex and Crocker outbid, although that is unlikely. But there's also a chance that the reserve prices change. We're actually lobbying the FCC pretty aggressively right now because they have removed a couple sites from the Block Island defined area. And we believe we have a very strong argument for reinstating those. But that is some background work that continues to go on to make sure that all the eligible sites on Block Island are included in that final reserve price.
Okay, Amy?
Yeah.
Bye, Martha.
I didn't, you said they're removing some sites. Is that do you mean some locales on Block Island are being removed?
Yes. So from the initial release of census block groups and the counts of locations in those census blocks, those numbers have changed already from the initial release to an update that they did. If anyone has followed the concept of FCC mapping and broadband, you have heard that those maps are terrible to say the least. And we're running into that now, in that the number of eligible sites has been reduced for Block Island because an entity has identified that they actually receive speeds in excess of the FCC minimum. We know that that's not true. We have to prove it to the FCC, and we understand where the miscommunication happened, and we're looking to have it corrected as aggressively as we can. So that's the best I can say about that. I'm sorry?
Fees in excess? Did they receive fees in excess? Is that what you said?
Speeds. All the FCC
Speeds.
maps are based on speeds, yes.
Oh,
Up and down
speeds.
speeds.
Probably running it off of, I don't know, someplace on the mainland. Okay.
It has
thank
to
you.
do with some confusion about the school and the library.
Okay.
And so
At
anyway,
least
we're
it's
working pretty
confusing
hard on
to
that.
Okay, good. Thank you, Amy.
Yep. So the only other thing I would point out is that because the RDOF process has a 10-year payback, if we were to be successful in that, it would require that we had a 10-year contract with Surtex and Crocker. And I pointed out only because it was not the Broadband Committee's initial preference to have a contract that long, because we don't have a fully open network where anyone can be an ISP. We wanted to maintain some flexibility with the town's ability to move service providers if we wanted to change or wanted to introduce more people to the system. But again, if we're successful in the RDOF, that won't be an option, and we would engage in a 10-year contract. We feel good about our partners, but it is a different parameter than we had initially contemplated. We did, however, ask for it in the RFP, so it's an eligible contract term.
Amy, could you just, I think I know the answer, but just to point out that our partners at Ocean are very much familiar with these two entities, the service providers, are they not?
Yes, they are.
Right. So
They've worked with them quite a bit.
Yeah, that's what I was, thank you. That's what I was wondering. Any further questions or comments for Amy on this particular page? I'd like to do a summation, I guess.
Sure, just for those people who may be following along at home or want to come back to myself or the council or the broadband committee with follow-up questions, we do intend to host some additional public information sessions before financial town meeting. We will release those dates. We're also meeting tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. via Zoom. We meet every Thursday. And then we do have a document that's being drafted right now that answers some frequently asked questions and would provide things like the pricing tiers so that everyone can see them. You can also email any questions to the broadband@new-shoreham email address, and we'll get back to you.
Great, and potentially the financial town meeting will be Monday, July 27th at 7 p.m. And there will be a question, one of the questions on that financial town meeting will be about this particular topic. Anything further, anyone wants to make a comment or anything? Andre. Oh, you're muted, Andre. Sorry.
No, I thank you. Amy, thank you in the broadband committee, and Ray's here too, I think, for putting this all together. We've had these discussions now for a couple of years. I'm very glad to see this move forward. My only question to you right now is, you know, do you need help? Would the town see any help in getting the assistance from our federal delegation with the FCC or anything like that? I know last time Senator Whitehouse was here, who was very interested in the project, and I know Ed was keeping him abreast and his staff of how we're making out with it. So if there's any time where you think that might be possible, that's needed, you know, please let us know or reach out yourself. I think we need to really just kind of stay on top of that and do whatever we can to get the project.
Yes, thank you. We are working with Reed's office, but we'll reach out to White House as well and enlist their assistance.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Andre. Anything further for anyone? again, thank you, Amy, for all the hard work and the entire committee, and Michelle and Sam and everyone. You guys have spent an incredible amount of time on this. And it's obviously going to be a monumental achievement once we finally get it done, if we can finally get it done. And I think it's going to change a lot of things out here in terms of our capabilities, in terms of our population. Obviously, this pandemic has demonstrated the need for it, to keep people informed, to keep people able to work, to keep people able to communicate, and have an alternative. I'm looking forward to that discussion and that vote. Thank you. Nothing? Oops, got you. Go ahead.
This is Kristen. Am I able to ask a public question at this time?
Sure. Go ahead, Kristen.
Great. So this is Kristen Bauman. I'm a resident of High Street. I wanted to follow up on Sven's clarification. The cost to the taxpayer at the $1 million rate there, and I understand that changes with the value of your property at $23. That's the payback number. And I think somewhere along here, I understood that once that's paid back, will that number go away? Will that payment not exist anymore? And if that's so, do you have a projection of when that is? Or did I misunderstand that?
No, that's correct. Because that is the infrastructure build cost, it does go away. What I've modeled right now is a 20-year term. In reality, I'd actually like to do a shorter one when it comes to actually financing, but we tend to model 20 years. And as I said, we're building a capital replacement reserve into the economics, which means we should have sufficient reserves to do maintenance and replacement along the way after that. So that is a payback number that eventually does go away, just like the sewer bond initial construction did eventually go away.
Great, thanks for that information. And then my follow-up question was, does it change the relationship with Ocean? Does this now become the service provider? Does Crocker become the service provider for the CIA, or does that stay a separate network?
That stays a separate network. Ocean will continue to service the CAI network. Those are standalone contracts. Although I will say that the entirety of the group, Ocean, Crocker, Surtex, and the town, have worked together to make sure they interface well, but those are separate contracts.
Thank you. Thank you.
Amy, that was a good. Thank you, Kristen. That was a very good point, Amy. That's a very good point about the capital reserve and building it into it so that we can maintain the system. We've seen how critical that can be in the power distribution on the island, and how that was allowed to deteriorate over the years, and now we're beginning, and we're quite a ways along into building a more resilient system, using some funds to do the capital improvement. So that's a very important part. Thank you. Thank you for the foresight. Sven Reesom.
I want to build on Kristen's question, which I thought was very good. Took mine further. If there's a way, Amy, and maybe I'm stating the obvious, to get that to a 10-year instead of a 20-year, and it's a minor increase, because the way that debt service works, that's tangible to a taxpayer. Oh, I get 10 years, 20 years feels like, I don't know. So I guess I would encourage that to be as short as possible within a reasonable elevation. Just encouraging it. I'm sure you agree.
We do some really conservative modeling so that we're not coming back with higher numbers later. But I will say, because I'm bringing other bond issuances to market right now, the rates are so low that we could, if we did it today, we could easily switch to a 10-year with essentially no change. I can't say that's going to be true in 3 or 6 or 9 months, but today it would be.
Follow up, Ken? But encouraging that if there is a way to say, or let me ask the question, you can answer it later. If it's passed in July, given that it's now July 1, there's pretty good evidence that it could be 10 years, et cetera, and have, I mean, it's an easier, tangible payout for somebody to think about 10 years or less than 20 years. So it's an obvious statement, but I would encourage us, we need all the tools to sell this, so just another tool. Thank you.
Sure, well, numbers.
Okay, ask a question.
Martha, go ahead.
I don't understand what Sven's saying.
Okay, Sven, could you explain?
Amy, do you want to?
Are you talking about bonding for 10 years instead of 20, or are you talking about getting money back faster?
Amy, you're muted. Amy, you're muted. Thank you.
Sorry, borrowing or bonding for 10 years as opposed to 20.
The payback is much bigger then.
The savings are significant over the life, yeah.
Right, the savings are significant, but the amount that we'd have to pay would be significantly more.
Yes.
And
However,
I think
like
that's
I
what
said,
people look at.
we do model, when I put these numbers together, they take a very conservative approach, meaning a longer term and a higher interest rate. In the
Right.
current environment, we actually have such low interest rates that the slide to 10 years would be pretty negligible to the taxpayer. But I will model those so that the council can see the numbers.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Amy. Any further questions or comments? Great. Thank you very much again, Amy, for your work. Next item on the agenda is continued from June 24th. It's a continued item. It's a public hearing on the New Shoreham fiscal year 2021 budget. Does anyone have any questions or comments about this? Amy, this was continued specifically to get any further comments from anyone on this?
It was actually specifically.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Thanks.
I'll defer to Jim.
Amy can answer. This was, Ken, we had extended it for that reason, but we had asked that this be extended so that we could kind of finish up the collective bargaining.
Right. I'm sorry. I just remembered that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions or comments at this point on this?
This is
So
Kristen again. Oh, I'm sorry. Am I cutting you off, Martha?
No, go ahead.
I didn't know if it was public or council yet. I can wait.
Okay. Thank you. Martha, go ahead.
No, I just had a question on we'll begin the warrant language later.
Okay. Did you want to bring it up now?
No, it's just a question.
Okay.
This was, will we be getting that? I know we only need 10 days to post it. So we'll be getting that, I guess when will we be acting on that? On the actual language?
Amy, go
with
ahead.
the dollar amount in it.
Amy, go ahead.
Sure. There is an item, I believe, for the warrant on the 6th, which is next Monday.
Great. That's all I need.
You have a draft warrant with everything but the broadband language. So I'll bring you proposed broadband language, and if the council wants to act on it or sit on it and digest it for a little bit, we can do that as well.
Great. Thank you, Amy.
Kristen Baumann, do you have a question?
Thank you. This is Kristen. I'm the resident of High Street, and I suppose I'm speaking as the vice president of the NAMI Block Island chapter, as well as the director of the Island Free Library. So I wanted to make a comment first about the request from NAMI Block Island for $3,000. And I just wanted to give a little more context to that request, as what we heard from the chief of police last week, and I wrote this quote down, was that these are more mental health issues and substance abuse issues in numbers that I have not seen in years. That is what the chief said to the council last week at the meeting. And what NAMI was requesting was funds to follow up on a program that was quite successful last year. And that was a program that was brought to the employers of Block Island by the medical center, the police department, the rescue squad, the South County Prevention Coalition, and NAMI Block Island. And that was about substance abuse and how to recognize it and how to possibly stop an overdose, how to use Narcan. It was with the employers. What NAMI wanted to do this year, and what the request for the money was to put that information into flyers and posters and informational resources that could go into employee housing, places of employment, staff rooms, businesses, as well as put together packets for the realtors to go into rental homes. So I just think there needed to be some context there, that as horrified as we were to hear that from the chief last week, NAMI knew this, of course. We're living through a pandemic. We've watched people, suffer with anxiety, mental health disorders, and drug issues. And so that was what we were working to do as part of this community to help curtail that. So just so you know, when you don't vote for that money, that's a message that you're sending to the public, that maybe that's not as important as it is to others. That's a comment I'd like to make. I have a few follow-up things about the budget. I'm curious as to why the Highways Department continues to carry forward close to $40,000 every year and never hires that position. I asked Ed Roberge that question last year. He assured me that position would be filled. You can see from year-end numbers this year, it has still not been fulfilled. It still remains in the budget. That's a chunk of money that could have gone to employee salaries, which they were just denied. They were threatened with layoffs while you carry this money forward year after year. And I'd like to add to that, the library gave up a position that was budgeted for this year, and this money still gets carried forward year after year. You also have in the budget $175,000 for Mansion Beach bathrooms, which the town employees now consider you very literally valuing other people's excrement more than them. That is what this budget is speaking to the town employees. So I urge you to look at those numbers again. I know you just accepted their contract vote, but understand they were threatened with layoffs, and this money remains in the budget. And I don't think that's fair. I think that the town employees just carried you through a pandemic. You were very good. You worked very hard. I understand the amount of work and time you gave during this pandemic, but understand that everything you voted on, decided on, worked on, the town employees helped you push through to the public and to the community to continue the safety for everyone in this town and to continue to be able to provide a successful summer. And when you don't reward them for that work, this is an election season, and you are speaking to your voters through this budget, and it's not appropriate. I'd also like to say that not only did the library contribute to how this budget can be fiscally responsible by giving up a position, the library of this town gave up book money. Book money. That's what I do for a living, is buy books for this town. We gave up book money, and yet the highway department carries $40,000 forward, and you have $175,000 for bathroom money. It's beyond me. It's very, very unconscionable. I can go back to mute, but I'm happy to answer questions on any of that. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Kristen. Yeah, if you could mute for right now, just for a moment, please. I was going to try to interrupt you to try and get an answer to your first question, but I wasn't able to. So I don't know if either Amy or Jim can address the question concerning this $40,000 item on the highway budget in terms of, I guess, personnel.
I can.
Go ahead, Jim.
Can you hear me? I want to make sure I'm not on mute.
Yeah, you may get a little closer to the speaker maybe, but yeah, go ahead.
Speakers are turned down too. Obviously, I don't go back multiple years with respect to the position in highway and the decisions that have been made in previous years relative to hiring that position. But in my conversations with the highway director and the finance director, it was clear that that was a position that had been agreed upon in previous years and was in the process that any community goes through to identify necessary necessary staffing levels. It has been a consensus that staff person is required. So there's two things. One, why hasn't it been filled? I think there's multiple pieces of that, and I don't purport to be an expert on how and why it's difficult to fill positions on Block Island. But I will say, based on my experience in municipal government, this is a particularly long time to have a position funded and not fill it, but it is important to get the right kind of people in organizations such as this, because it is oftentimes difficult to make changes once those decisions have been made. So kind of a long answer. I asked the same question. I think being selective and maybe having some difficulty filling that position were the shorter answers that I was given. There was also some strangeness to this year, I think, on the part of just about every department, and that one was certainly included in terms of trying to fill the position in the middle of the year, figuring out what the actual level of effort is going to be during the year. I would also add to the other parts of that comment that Kristen made. This is one of the few communities that closed town hall and put virtually every employee as it applied. There were certainly plenty of people that continued to work, but in cases where people couldn't work because of constraints on their internet capability and all manner of other constraints, they were put out on administrative leave and paid. So that's what the community did going into the difficulty. And a number of other communities in Rhode Island, and Massachusetts, but in Rhode Island didn't do it that way. They started furloughing and reducing staff right from the beginning. So this has been a complicated process. Any discussion about a difficult budget year next year is going to include all of the adjustments or all of the changes in staffing, including furloughs and layoffs. But that's a conversation that has to happen, because you can't have it halfway through next year. First of all of the decisions you made have to be twice as drastic. You have to have it now. We had that conversation as part of collective bargaining process, and that's the way it's supposed to go. And I would agree with Kristen that there have been significant sacrifices made by the employees. However, we do move out of this year not having laid off anyone, not having furloughed anyone, and making a commitment not to have layoffs next year. So everybody has been allowed to keep their positions, their benefits, and hopefully things aren't as bad as what's expected. But part of sound fiscal management in cases like this is to not make things worse by being overly optimistic. As I said, then you have to go back and make more drastic changes halfway through the year. So you're trying to keep the bad news in front of you and proceed through the year that way. Thanks.
Thank you, Jim. Any comments from the council? Andre Boudreau? Go ahead, Andre.
Yeah, is Amy still here?
Yes, she is.
Amy, could you just discuss the infrastructure fund, of which those monies for the for the bathrooms at Mansion, because that needed to be clarified for me also. And I'll let you take it from there.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Great. Yes, the proposed amount for the bathrooms at Mansion Beach are not being funded through the tax base or through the general revenue of the town. It's specifically being funded with a transfer from the infrastructure fund, which was established by previous councils, I think 2015, to fund infrastructure and physical assets and improvements to the town of New Shoreham. So most of the items actually in the current year capital budget are funded through the infrastructure fund. We actually have very little in the capital that's being funded directly through the operating budget. So the Mansion Beach bathrooms are a little bit unique in that respect, in that those funds can't be reallocated to say staffing or operational expenses. It's unique to infrastructure and physical improvements.
So may I follow up, Ken?
Go ahead, Andre, please.
So just so the public's clear, Amy, that infrastructure fund is funded how?
It was funded with dollars that were received in the sale of easements and options related to Deepwater Wind and National Grid project. And so the money that the town, that came into the town as a result of those projects were set aside specifically for infrastructure uses.
And thank you for that explanation. I think it needs to be clear to the taxpayers and the townsfolk that this money for those bathrooms is coming from, basically what Amy just said. It's not coming out of any town tax base. It's restricted to be used for infrastructure only. So I just wanted that to be clear.
Thank you, Andre. Good point. Other comments, questions for the council?
Ken?
Go ahead, Martha.
Yeah, I just want to back up to NAMI, and I made this comment last week, which apparently fell on deaf ears, that last year NAMI had funding from, I know, at least one private funding source for the telemedicine, which no longer comes through NAMI, and there was no grant application made to that particular funding source for any sort of expenditure this year from NAMI.
Okay. Thank you, Martha.
If I may follow up on Martha's comment about NAMI, the NAMI, the telemedicine fund, the grant that we received for telemedicine is to launch telemedicine for adolescents and children, and that has not been launched, and that money will be used for that. And it didn't fall on deaf ears. I knew you would repeat that statement tonight. And what I'd like to say is that we thought it appropriate to alternate between private funders and private grants and have the town be able to voice an opinion on these matters and support those issues. So yes, we asked for a grant last year outside of the town, and that will be used to launch adolescent telemedicine, which is not covered by the town yet. And this year we thought the town could have an opportunity to support the project, the work and the projects that NAMI does. I'd also like to follow up on Jim Kern's comment that highway money has been carried forward for years. And while he gives a good story about finding the right candidate, you usually have to start with posting the job. That job has never been posted. So that's all baloney, and I don't think we should accept it. And I so appreciate the clarification about the bathrooms, because man, it's hard to deal and supervise staff that thinks they're valued less than crap. So I totally appreciate that clarification, and I wish it had been clearer in the budget. So thank you, Andre, for egging the clarification on.
Yeah, I appreciate it too. I really sort of resented the insinuation that we value people's excrement over town employees. So I appreciate that illumination also. Does anyone else on the council have any comments or questions on this? All right, Amy. Amy, do we need to take action on this tonight?
Yes, so I would suggest that you close the public hearing, and then if you have If you wish to make any changes, go ahead. If you don't, then you can adopt the budget as presented so that we can prepare it for financial town meeting.
All right. Thank you, Amy.
And can I
Go ahead.
ask one quick question, Amy? I got a couple of calls about it this week, and maybe you could, similar to the infrastructure fund, but maybe you can just remind everybody about the police. I believe it's 55,000 that, excuse me, 27,000 from this year, and then budgets versus the fire department, that 250. Could you just remind everybody what we talked about last time as to where the fire department and that monies are going, and how that balances with the police department?
Sure, bear with me, Sven, because you threw a lot of numbers at me and I didn't catch them all.
Sorry.
So this,
I believe.
Sorry, can you? Yeah.
Go ahead, Sven.
I believe current year in the police was just current year meaning 2020 was replace ATV, if I have a right sheet in front of me, for 27,000, and there was money in 2021 or not, and then two, I was asked about the movement of the funds for the fire truck. Chris asked about this last week, and I'm just wanting to make sure it's heard by others.
Sure. Let's start with the police first. So there was 27,000 in the current year budget to replace the ATV, which allows them to have beach access. You'll see often Matt Moran using that vehicle. So that was replaced and it is operational. There is no similar funding for that in the current year. There is, in the operational side, ongoing police vehicle replacements, but that's an operational item. When you talk about the fire equipment, there was originally, or when last year's multi-year capital program was put together, it anticipated an amount for fiscal year 21 to do an engine refit. Given this landscape that we're in, that engine refit has been deferred to 2022 at this point. Again, when we get to creating the 2022 budget is when that will actually be evaluated for inclusion or not. But it is not included in the 21 budget. As we said, there's not a lot of capital items that are not funded except through the infrastructure fund in the current year, the 21 year. So that engine refit right now has been moved out to fiscal year 22 as part of the multi-year capital plan. Does that help?
Thank you.
Catherine Marola, do you have your hand up?
No, I'm muted.
Okay, I saw your hand come up, sorry. Chris Willie?
Amy, can you tell me again what the, I guess would be deficit, or not potential deficit, but the deficit that we have to make up for? What was that number again?
Sure. When we first, we put a budget together, if you remember, in early March, and when we went back and reviewed that initially for a mid-COVID evaluation, we had a shortfall of about $1.2 million initially. And so that $1.2 million has been closed through a number of mechanisms, but that's what we had to reconcile.
Right. So I guess I wanted to know that number just so we can, I mean, I understand all of Kristen's concerns, and most of them, all of them are valid. And there's a lot of departments. I've talked with some of the members of the fire department this week. And I tried to iterate to them that we're trying to like plug up the hole that was created by this pandemic, among other things. And basically everything's deferred a year. And everybody has, when I say everybody, the town, a lot of the departments, the employees, the police department, et cetera, have deferred a lot of things that they, as well as previous councils have worked hard to establish, like the infrastructure fund and capital improvement program and getting on a schedule. A wrench was thrown in it all, and I think, I mean, I would love to give $3,000 and $5,000, to NAMBY and all the public support that we typically support. But I don't see how we can, and it's in a word, it sucks. So, and we don't know where we're going revenue wise moving forward, and that's going to be another thing that we have to assess, I guess, at the end of the summer and take into consideration for next year's budget. So, you still got me?
We're losing your audio.
That's because my connection is unstable.
Sorry. Yeah,
that's why we need broadband.
I know. Right there at the end, your last sentence or two faded out. I'm sorry.
I just said, we still we're not necessarily out of the woods until we see what our revenues are going to be at by the end of the summer. And, asking for everybody's patience, I know is tough at this point, but I don't think this council's lost on the needs of the rest of the town departments and the public support for that we typically do. And, I guess, with this upcoming budget, this is kind of a weird year. Let's get through it and then get back on track. This council supported the town employee contract wholeheartedly. And it was a long time coming. And it really disappoints me to see that come to basically get deferred a year. But at the same time, I do agree with a lot of Jim's comments on how the town handled the employee base during in the pandemic and administrative leave. I think that was better than what a lot of other towns did. So moving forward, though, with this budget, I just ask for everybody's patience with it. I mean, we'd love to support a lot of the things that have been asked for, but we just don't have the money there. And that's the bottom line. And I haven't heard any good suggestions. The $40,000 that Kristen brought up is a very good point. That was the first good suggestion that I've heard. So, so I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Andre?
Yeah, I can echo what Chris says, and we are going to take a beating for that because we make this decision to move the budget forward. I agree with what Jim and Amy put together, the reasoning. These are tough decisions that we have to make while we sit in these seats. But that being said, I did have a conversation with members of the fire department today, and they would like to speak to us. And, I think Beth's going to send us a letter, maybe in the morning, suggesting a time next week where we could meet. They have concerns about their budget. And I thought that they should bring them to us. I suggested them maybe contacting us and having a meeting about their budget. I think they're concerned. So like I said, that being said, I would like to, hold off on closing the public hearing right now, just until we can hear from them. I mean, I know, or have a meeting with them to take, just to listen to their concerns. We haven't been able to do that with many organizations, and this one's asking for it. And I would like to personally give them that opportunity. So
I would point out that they did have the opportunity over several budget sessions. We did have a representative of the department speak at one of those meetings. The opportunity was there. Obviously, all of us have had conversations with the fire department this week, one sort or another. That the conversations, the concerns that they had, some of them have been addressed tonight in terms of what money is being used for what, and the prioritization that has to occur in a year such as this. Difficult decisions have to be made, and certain. Amy has indicated that if under certain conditions that can be those fundings can be prioritized and sped up, but not at the moment. They need to be put off. So I'm hesitant to delay this public hearings because we need to move on with the financial town meeting. Obviously, as you know, questions can be raised, and that's why we still have financial town meetings. Questions can be raised in the financial town meetings and have a discussion at that meeting. I'd personally be hesitant to put this off any longer.
Okay. So all I'm saying is that our Block Island Volunteer Fire and Rescue would like to have a meeting with the town council about their budget. And I'd like to keep it open until we can have that conversation. So I get what you're saying, but if you want to make the motion, that's fine.
Well, it sounds like you'd like to make the motion on Sven. Hold on a second. Sven, go ahead.
Real quickly, Amy, if one were, today's the 1st, I mean, if assuming they can meet quickly and we could do a meeting in a couple of days, just a question of process and timing.
Yes. Much more than a day or two, and we are running out of time to meet the legal postings that we need to in order to hold financial town meeting on the 27th. In that the budget process requires that we go through the State Department of Administration for sign-offs, and there are legal notice periods again for posting that budget. So a couple days is the most that we have.
Well, we have a council meeting on Monday. Obviously, any meeting we need 48 hours notice. We have a meeting scheduled for Monday. If that would put us too far behind. Anyone?
Amy, what is the time? What would be the last day we could have a meeting with them?
I would say it would be the 6th. If you recall, we were actually supposed to close this public hearing at our last meeting. So we've already pushed the calendar.
I understand that, but we have a revered institution in this town that is asking to talk with us. And I know it may be at the expense of time. So I'm bringing that to the council. I'd like to see that happen, and any way we could make that happen, that would be great.
Well, the way to make it happen would be a motion.
Ken, question?
Ben, go ahead.
And maybe Molly here, I mean, and Amy, would it help if we could have a meeting Friday night? I'm asking, and I don't even know if that's legally able, given 48 hours. So, I mean, would Saturday morning help you, Amy, versus Monday? I hear Andre, I get it. I'm just trying to figure out if there's any other timing.
Saturday's the 4th of July, I believe.
No parade, no fireworks.
It's still a holiday.
So we could post them. What's today? Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
Would any of that help you, Amy?
If you're going to extend this meeting, the sooner you can wrap it up, the better. I am already working in a grace period with the state. So I'm using my goodwill to extend the deadline that we're currently in.
Okay.
Chris Willie.
Yeah.
If this is gonna happen, I'm gonna ask that they come to the table with something extremely specific other than refund us, because it's to the tune of $200 and something thousand that we don't have. I mean, that's I understand. I've had the conversation with members of the fire department, and I'm open to hear an argument, but you have to have a funding source. So the only funding source is out of reserves, as I understand it, or cut something, and I don't know what else can be cut. So it's the conversation is going to be the same one I've had probably all week with members of the fire department. So I need to know exactly how it's even going to be feasible, if it's going to be entertained, before we have the meeting. Otherwise, it's just to have a meeting. I understand their concerns moving forward, clearly, and I support. I mean, I've supported the fire department's requests in the past because they need to be on that maintenance schedule and that capital improvement schedule more than a lot of other departments. They have trucks that are 30 years old, and that need to be, upgraded. And they just received delivery of one at the beginning of the summer. So if we continue it, then we need to know where that, if it's even entertainable for what the ask is. Otherwise, it's just an exercise in meeting with them. And we've had a number of budget meetings thus far, and I think Bain, I think was the only one I've heard from. So, and okay, basically, why now? Why at the 11th hour? I need to know if it's even possible to entertain what their ask is before I have a meeting with them.
Thank you, Chris. You have something?
Ken?
Go ahead, Martha.
I agree with Chris. I also think that at a certain point, we have got to stop acting as if Amy Land, as extraordinary as she is, can pull any rabbit out of any hat anytime anybody wants it. You've got to have some respect for the amount of work that woman does for this town, for this community, the extraordinary time and effort she puts in. And you just keep blithely saying, well, give us a few more days, Amy, give us a few more days. Let's talk about respecting our employees. That means all of them. That doesn't mean the ones that lobby. That means everybody. And I really think, Amy may have just done too darn good a job that you've all lost sight of the fact that there are limitations. If she's talking about using her own goodwill upstate, you better be listening to her.
Thank you, Martha. Sven,
Well,
hold on, Chris. Hold on. Sven, did you have your hand up?
Sorry, no.
Go ahead, Chris. Sorry. Chris, go ahead.
I don't think anybody doubts the capabilities and what Amy's saying, and just like we don't doubt the value of the fire department, which is an institution. My point is, I hear what Amy's saying. I also hear what the fire department is saying, and there has to be the harsh reality of what the current environment is. It's simple as that. I will always entertain funding something if we can come up with a way to fund it, but I don't see how it's possible right now, and that's kind of the point. And yes, I know Amy can do some magic when necessary, and I think there's been plenty of magic done to get us to this point, and that's and not funding a fire department request this year and all the other requests this year doesn't mean they aren't valued or all the other entities aren't valued. It's like I said, it's just a different environment for the time being, and we need to get through it. And I will support fire department funding in the future, but that's not the only thing that's been deferred. That's all.
Thank you, Chris.
If I could just say, I had agreed with what Chris said before when he said it this time. I still do.
I'm sorry, Martha, what?
No, I think we all support these things. We just, the way that Chris has said it, I don't need to repeat what Chris said.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Can I agree with Martha, and I know how hard Amy's working, but I'm just trying to make sure I understand meeting protocols. Molly, can you help me if we continue this meeting till tomorrow, and I'm literally saying Thursday, is that possible to then continue this meeting to tomorrow without a 48-hour posting? I'm just asking process technicality.
Well, we'll be continuing a public hearing. is what would be.
Yes, you can
We would
continue to a date certain.
Sven, did you get that answer? Molly,
Yes.
please.
Yes, you can continue the meeting to a date certain without re-advertising.
Do we have availability of a Zoom the Zoom platform to do that tomorrow?
Yes.
Okay.
And if I can just continuing, I 1,000,000% agree with Martha and everybody else about Amy's work and everything. If anybody feels and the group feels passionate enough to delay and we continue to tomorrow, that's much better in my mind than Monday or anything. I highly respect all the work that's been done, but it would mean that we could continue this discussion and then close it tomorrow night at Thursday if there's going to be tangible meeting results, to Chris's point, through a discussion tomorrow night with the fire department. Thank you.
I'll entertain a motion.
This is, can I just ask a quick question? This is Kristen Bauman again. Just a clarification on the clarification. If you are looking for money for the fire department and it is for infrastructure, can the Mansion Beach bathrooms be moved to that? Or are they totally earmarked just for a single project?
Amy, can you answer that question? Jim, do you have an answer?
It's
Sorry.
not, I'm not, my understanding of the infrastructure fund, it's similar to sale of city property. It is typically for bricks and mortar. That's what an infrastructure fund would be restrained to. Not fixing fire departments. And in terms of meeting tomorrow, obviously it's up to the council, but I think the question, I think it's important to kind of understand whether there's a plausible discussion that results in something different. I'll leave it there.
Well, the answer to that is whether or not there's funds available, if the council chose to do anything about it. Any questions or comments? I guess that's the bottom line. I mean, this isn't, what it comes down to is we can have a discussion and we can all agree that this is something that needs to happen. But the question is whether or not the funds are there to make it happen this year, whether or not it has to be deferred until next fiscal year. So, we just having all of us say, yeah, this really needs to happen isn't necessarily going to do it if the funds aren't there to do it. So, I don't know.
Okay, well, I get it, but we should maybe, all right, if we want to just close the public hearing, then we should at least have the conversation with them as a council instead of, so-and-so's getting a phone call here and there and yada, yada, yada. They have things they want to talk to us about as a council. So, and it's not all budget either. They just want to meet with us and explain their long-term prospects and their long-term ideas for the fire barn and everything. So I would like to have that conversation with them. And, I guess you're right. And Amy pulling money out of a hat, maybe not going to happen this year. Kristen, answer your question. No, it's not brick and mortar things they need. But I did, I asked them like, okay, what's your bare bones bottom line? I mean, there's things they spend their own money on that I didn't know about. And there's initiatives with the young kids that they're trying to move forward with that I knew about, but obviously it needs funding. I think we should all have that conversation with them as a council. So yeah, if the money's not going to come from anywhere this year because you can't use the infrastructure fund for it, we've already rated the other, the reserves, and I get it. I explain the same thing to them, but they want to have a conversation with us. So I think we should afford them that.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, to echo Andre, yes, they do have a lot on their plate coming up, and they have a lot of good initiatives. And that conversation should have, because I have a lot of questions for them, as I did a few years ago when they came in with the fire truck ask, which they just took delivery on. So that should be added to an agenda in the immediate future, because I think there'll be some good give and take, and as far as the future of the fire department, and it might roll into the future of the rescue squad, et cetera, because that things are changing, and that's going to be all part of planning for next year's budget and budgets thereafter. So I would very much like to have that department meeting with them, but not regarding this budget.
Sorry, Chris, I thought you were done. Sven Riesum, go ahead. Sven, you're muted.
I would love to have an agenda item added to the 6th, and we can work on the wording to have a meeting with the fire department, but I make a motion to close the public hearing on the budget and to thank Amy for an amazing amount of work. Motion's made.
Motion made by Sven.
Point of order.
Go ahead, Molly.
It's too late to add anything to the agenda on the 6th.
Okay, next agenda item. Next agenda. Sorry. Thank you.
Certainly.
Martha?
A second.
Martha seconds the motion by Sven. Sven, your motion was to close the public hearing, I believe. Correct? Sven?
Aye.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm asking for clarification, Sven.
Sorry.
Your motion was to close the.
You're breaking up.
I'm breaking up? Okay.
Or I am.
Okay, so your motion was to close the public hearing, correct? Thank you. All right. We have a motion on the floor to close the public hearing. All those in favor, Andre?
No.
Chris?
Aye.
Sven?
Aye.
Martha?
Aye.
I vote in the affirmative. Motion carries 4-1 to close the public hearing.
This is Kristen Bauman one more time. There was no ask for final questions or comments before the vote was taken. So I don't know where that stands, but I just would like to have confirmation from the council that the budget you just moved for, or the closed public hearing, you have confirmation that neither the police nor the school will get, their unions will not lobby for raises. The budget as it stands is the budget that will be presented at financial town meetings, that it's not just the town employees that are being held to last year's salary rates.
Jim? You can confirm that?
Yeah, as I said earlier, I have an agreement in principle with the police union, and this, as it relates to the school budget, this budget decreases their appropriation next year by the equivalent amount of school department employees not getting a raise, and that's the approach that the school superintendent and school committee is pursuing. And so that I should stop there. There are processes that each collective bargaining group has to go through, but there won't be a pay increase for the police department, and I don't expect there to be an increase for school employees outside of NSEA.
That is what we're going on. All right.
And that's what's included in this budget.
Okay. Correct me if I'm wrong, but we just, Amy, the next step we have to take is to forward the budget.
I don't think you voted that yet.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
Yes,
Amy.
if you want to take a vote to adopt the budget as presented. I don't believe there were any amendments, unless you make any now, for forwarding to the voters at financial town meeting.
I'll make a motion to adopt the budget as presented and finalized this evening and forward it to the voters for a financial town meeting.
Second,
Seconded by Sven. Further discussion from council? Andre?
Jim, I heard what you said about the to Kristen's answer about the school and whatnot. So you don't think you think we're going to have an agreement with no raises and from the school folks?
That's correct.
But is that signed yet? Like, do we have the document with that yet, or that's just what you're hearing?
That's what the superintendent, I don't have the document. That's between the superintendent school committee and the teachers. So we're not talking about the NSEA school employees, and I just haven't heard back from the school superintendent in the last day or two.
But there is a chance that this budget could be different. There is a slight chance.
Let's be clear. The budget that you're about to move forward has a reduction in the school budget. And the school superintendent said to the town council, he would operate under that budget. So that's the budget that they're going to operate under. The question was put to him and he responded, this is the budget that we will operate under. And so that won't change. In terms of the negotiations with the collective bargaining group, I've given the answer that what expectations are relative, and those are based on conversations with the superintendent. But the budget is the budget. So the answer to the question, will there be a different budget? There won't be, based on the budget that the town council is preparing to vote to send to financial town meeting. That reduction from their original ask, if you'll remember back, their original request was a 3.2% increase. This was reduced to a 2% increase. The question was put to the superintendent, and the superintendent answered that we will work within the budget as it was presented.
I get it. I know what you're saying. So you're giving the budget, how they spend it is how they spend it is. But it's still unclear though, as if we're asking, and our town employees have signed an agreement with no raises and whatnot. So what you're saying is that we can send the school budget, even though it's lower, that could turn out for raises for school employees, teachers in the union. Is that correct in assuming that?
That's a question probably better put to the school superintendent and school committee.
Which we can't get an answer to now.
I've had the conversations that I've had with them, and I've given the answer based on their answers to me. Well, the school superintendent's answer to me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. I'll call the question. All those in favor, Andre?
No.
Chris?
Aye.
Sven?
Aye.
Martha?
Aye.
I vote in the affirmative. Motion carries 4-1. Next item on the agenda is to act on a recommendation of the Board of Assessment Review for 2019 tax roll abatement of $3,290.92. Make a motion to approve the total 2019 tax roll abatement of $3,290.92 as recommended by the Board of Assessment.
Second.
Seconded by Andre. Any discussion? All is in favor, Andre?
Aye.
Martha?
Aye.
Ben?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
I vote in the affirmative. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda, discuss and act on possible amendment to the emergency ordinance 2 of the town of New Shoreham adopted May 27, 2020 pertaining to the COVID-19 pandemic. We put this on in case there are any updates we had to do. Does anyone have any questions or comments about this particular item on the agenda?
Do you want to give an update about the meeting with last week?
Which one?
Either one. that's pertaining to the COVID.
Which meeting? I mean,
The one we had with the state leaders about what's going on with enforcement and, all that stuff, and phase 3 crowd sizes. Sven, you want to give an update on the education, initiative?
okay, well,
Who wants to go first?
well, I mean, we're discussing and acting on possible amendments to the ordinance. I'm not sure if you want to have a discussion on an amendment to the ordinance or just a general informational session.
Well, I'll ask. So a resident contacted and said that if there was issues with crowds gathering and more than the allotted people, what would the DBR do? And according to this person I spoke to, the DBR said you got to go talk to your town council. So I think we need to have the conversation as if this thing's going on while the state is out here doing enforcement, and they were very strict about notifying everybody that they don't want to see any, one person can ruin the pot here, can ruin the soup. So I'm just wondering if we want to have a discussion about any steps we can take further to either bolster the state's position or deal with large crowds and gatherings wherever they may be.
I open it up to discussion. If you'd like to start that discussion, go ahead.
Well, I think I just did. Do we want to have the discussion?
As far as the emergency ordinance is concerned, yes, the state has, after careful consideration, the state has decided to allow Block Island to go to phase 3 along with the rest of the state. They have specific recommendations and specific ordinances, which they were working on as of yesterday and hopefully finalized today in relation to operations of restaurants and bars and whatnot. And that information is going to be disseminated directly to those facilities, to the bars, the restaurants, and also to the town as by my request to them, to DBR and the Commerce Department. They are basically indicating that they want the town to try to encourage the use of masks, of social distancing, of washing hands. They want to encourage businesses to do as much as they can to follow the rules of engagement, if you will, in terms of masks in their establishments, maintaining the level of occupation that's been recommended in terms of the percentages, given the space that they have in their restaurants. They have specific recommendations in terms of seating at the bar and service at the bar, at bars. And like I said, they were finalizing those and we're going to disseminate them. We were given some indication of them the other day. And they did update the numbers of allowable in both interior and exterior locations, but they did emphasize that when possible, that the numbers of crowds should be minimized to help prevent further spread. They will be doing as much as they can. They're going to be, as was indicated, they're going to be giving us another batch of masks to be handed out by our local police and volunteers and CSO officers. The state also indicated that they will be furthering and continuing to do compliance checks through the Department of Business Regulations and the Commerce Department. They will be sending out inspectors to continue doing compliance checks on a regular basis for those businesses where they're considered critical in terms of exposure. And they're continuing to work with the Block Island Ferry and other ferries to and other forms of transportation to the island to minimize as much as possible, the cross-contamination. So basically that's pretty much where we are with that. As far as any particular changes to the ordinance, I would open up for discussion. Sven, did you have your hand up?
I was just going to add that I've already talked to the chief and the CSOs. He's going to ask or have them meet the boats on the 3rd and the 4th. My hope is between the police department and interstate that we can have that lighted sign at the ferry all day. I thought that was really, really helpful. The CSOs are, to Ken's point, handing out masks, a guide, as well as a sheet, bilingual, that basically talks about the governor's order as well as the town order. So that is continuing on. And I just wanted everybody to know that.
Thank you, Sven.
Jim?
Andre, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that when we had our discussion with them, they said they were out here doing enforcement actions, not actions, but doing enforcement. And they've spoken of what?
Inspections, yeah.
Yeah, not actions, but inspections, and they've been really good about it. But I mean, it came up, and I'm not sure if we got an answer on that. But does the town get notified, Jim, of any violations? Because I haven't heard of any, and I'm just wondering if we would get notified, or how does that work?
We don't get notified officially. I think there's a process. I've had some conversations with the director, and I've had some conversations with the council about being able to identify numbers. In general conversation with the director of DBR, they will come out. I know there are at least 4 establishments on Block Island that have had follow-up visits. They will follow up more than once in some cases to ensure compliance. It takes essentially, as we've talked about in other cases, a business that is to the point where even after 1 or 2 visits they're demonstrating a kind of an out-and-out defiance, and then it becomes kind of an enforcement process where they're given a violation under the governor's statute and the enforcement powers that are vested in DBR and DOH. So we haven't gotten to that point. My understanding is that we would be informed then, but I think they would also inform us as to if we requested it, just kind of the general state of affairs.
Thank you.
Other questions or suggestions on the emergency ordinance update? Chris Willie, go ahead.
Is there anything regarding phase 3 that we should be aware of or concerned with?
Well, the biggest thing and the biggest problem they were looking at, I think, aside from the sheer numbers and the volume in general, was the bar service, and that basically broke down to 3 ways of utilizing the bars. The first way would be to have a bar used solely as a service to the restaurant. That is to say, no one sitting at the bar. The bar is being used to service the restaurant's seated guests, and will only be available to servers who are going to be serving those tables. The second way it could be used would be to have the bars used as tables for the restaurant, not service as a bar service, but only service being used as a table, as an extension of the restaurant seating. And the third way it could be used as a bar for seating at the bar would be to have plexiglass separating the servers and the customers. Drinks would be passed through a slot in the plexiglass, but there would not be allowed any service of customers across the bar who are not seated at the bar. And the important thing they noted was that no one should be able to walk up and get a drink themselves from the bar because they're trying to curtail any kind of congregate activity, any kind of people waiting in line or standing in front or behind each other and lining up and that sort of thing. And when asked by a business owner, well, you know, if people are doing that, the Commerce Department basically said it's the business's responsibility to police their customers, to inform their customers of the proper protocols within the restaurant and to make sure that the recommended protocols of the Department of Health and the CDC are being followed. So that's the responsibility and onus is on the establishment rather than on the customers. So other than that, as I said, in the phase 3, the expansion of the numbers in terms of activities, while they did raise the number of folks that can attend certain activities inside and outside, they were recommending that those activities be kept at a lower level whenever possible, just in the interest of trying to prevent things. They did say that weddings and that sort of thing would fall under a different category if they were catered as opposed to just a general open atmosphere. So that a wedding, a pre-planned wedding that was being catered might be able to go to the higher level of occupation versus just a general concert or something like that that might be occurring. Andre, any other highlights you recall?
Yeah, I see Jim's got his hand up. I'll let him go.
Thanks. I was just going to jump in with Ken. They did, for a couple reasons, they did lower the numbers, the original target numbers for phase 3, and that's partly what's happened in other parts of the country, but also some feedback from the coastal communities communicating some of our concerns about large gatherings. So they reduced the numbers from their original targets down a considerable amount, but they also felt like they had kind of whipsawed some people that had set up weddings based on those original objectives, those original target numbers and statements by the governor and other state officials. So they felt like they should allow those to proceed based on those, if they were higher than the numbers that they ended up at. So they had higher numbers, dropped them to lower numbers, but allowed some that had been, as Ken said, pre-planned. The ultimate result of that is lower numbers in phase 3 than what they were originally shooting for or originally planning, and but trying not to be unfair to those who had planned ahead of time.
Chris, go ahead.
And all that information's on, you can find that at Reopening Rhode Island.
Yeah,
that website.
It should be, but like I said, they were still finalizing some of the specifics of the bar activity and some of the restaurant activity as of Monday, and actually as of Tuesday. What's today? Wednesday. As of Tuesday, they were still finalizing that as we were speaking to them. So.
Thank you.
Yeah. Andre?
I think that summaries are great. It's good to get it out there in public. But, from all these conversations we've had, I think, I've been able to kind of just distill it down to its crowds. The state is very concerned about crowds. And they're trying to just let the businesses do business as best as they can. But they are very concerned about large crowds, and they pretty much put the onus on the business. Like, you need to pay attention to the rules. It's all on the business. And that's basically I think is their attitude that they gave us on that they're telling us on that. So Jim, I see you turned up, but I just want to we coverage for the weekend with state police, and are we all good? We got what we asked for, and
We got 2 additional state troopers for this weekend. We also have the complement of the normal complement of additional police officers. As we've discussed earlier, we have our CSOs. So, you know, we're concerned, as the chief discussed last week. I think the ongoing educational, and this has been true, I've talked to city and town managers in the other coastal communities. It's consistent with them. Your educational efforts hope to get in front of and as the chief was saying, reach people who would be inclined to be rule followers. And as I said, we don't want people to come off with a completely different mindset that once I step off the boat, everything that was a rule before I stepped off the boat's not a rule anymore. I think we've gone a long way to accomplishing that with the signs and the handouts that a number of people worked on. And then I think you're moving into the same kind of concerns you have any big holiday weekend, not only in terms of the COVID situation, but the other situations that come from those crowd gatherings, people behaving as they do in those settings. So I'm not going to say there isn't concern on the part of the police chief, but I think it's a continuation and of effort, and the conversations with the DVR will go on too. I mean, we've got anyways 8 good weeks to go, and probably more than that if the weather cooperates into September and people are trying to make some money back from the early season. So it's going to be an ongoing effort to try to continue to get people to where they need to be.
I think the biggest thing that keeps coming across, and what people are using as a marker, what people are looking at as the most visible thing, and that is how many people are following the basic rules, simple rules of wearing their masks and the social distancing, and maybe a little bit less, but still as important is washing the hands. And we did point out that while we may have some customers who may be falling short in terms of some of those performance recommendations, it's important for the businesses themselves and the employees to set a good example. And we're having instances where some of the employees are trying to set that good example, and they're getting some, little bit of negative feedback from the customers. But I commend those who are continuing to wear their masks at work and try to protect themselves and their customers from anything. And that's the right thing to do. And if everyone could just if it's as simple as just having your mask with you when you're getting anything other than if you get any kind of social situation of less than 6 feet, put it on. And that's the best thing we can do. So, Sven Reesum, go ahead. You're muted, Sven.
One of the things, real quickly, one of the things that I talked to the chief about, if anybody has any ideas, it appears that all the education awareness, signage, LED sign, getting off the boat is great. I think, as people get off the boat, it's fine. Oftentimes when the visitors, tourists get on the beach, the mask goes in their pocket. It's sweaty, it's hot. They come back into town at around 2, 3, maybe they've had a pop or two. And as they're walking through town, I'm just going to say 2:30 until they get the boat, or 3 o'clock until they get the boat. That's where the compliance really seems to weaken. And a lot of that's due to weather, heat, sweat. So any ideas about how do we get the masks out of the pocket and on them in the afternoon? Would love to hear it. And I'm working with the chief or anybody to try and figure that one out, because we all know you're sweating. We get it, right? But any ideas, would love to hear about it, and we'll try and figure out how to implement it.
I did relay those concerns to the governor's office this afternoon, Sven, directly.
Did you ask them to make it a little cooler?
No, but I did express our concerns about that, and they said they would try to take it into consideration and try and come up with some answer, well. Andre, do you want to follow up?
Yeah, there was some questions from businesses about Tom Warcup, you're here, right? Tom?
Yep. There he is.
There he is.
Yeah, I'm here.
Welcome. Welcome. We know you've been busy, with the phone calls upstate and all. The other day on our meeting, some businesses had expressed concern that, they sent employees to be tested and it was costing for tests. Is there any movement on that, for reduction in that, or if somebody needs to be mass tested? Can you give an update on that issue right there with the cost of tests for employers if they want to have employees tested?
Sure. Yeah, it's a real challenge for small businesses for sure. So it's been going through various stages of conversation at the state level. The state of Rhode Island is considering reimbursing offices to do asymptomatic testing. So right now, if you are symptomatic with upper respiratory issues, then most insurance companies will pay for the entire testing process and the visit. The testing has always been free. The testing, both for the COVID Abbott testing, which is the rapid test, and the state testing is always free, but there's a small charge. We call it a 99212, basically an enhanced nurse visit cost structure for us to do all the work to gather the testing and transport it out, and then do the infrastructure within the office. We have had multiple conversations with SEMA Dixit and the Department of Environmental Emergency Management about when would we prefer them to come out and do large-scale asymptomatic testing. And I think we're getting close. We're starting to see a fair amount of numbers for testing on a weekly basis. We're getting about 7 to 10 requests per day from both people that are residents that are leaving, people that are traveling to the island, all variations of that. So we're actually having a conversation tomorrow morning as an office of when to reach out to the state, which is they've asked us that very question. And I think we're getting close to asking them to come out on a weekly basis and do large-scale free asymptomatic testing. But at least they would take care of all the infrastructure on their own and have a facility offsite, maybe at the fire barn or something of that nature. To date, confirmed with SEMA is that we've had 18 residents tested and that are negative. We've had the one positive patient back from April 2nd. That's our only positive case from a resident to date. We did have 2 episodes. There was a breakdown in information from the Department of Health. There's a COVID-19 testing group who then will let SEMA Dixit know, who then will let us know. So there's a variety of chains of command, if you will. There was one person that worked on the island that tested positive on 5/29. All of the contact tracing was done and nothing more came from that. And there was one person that visited the island that stayed at one of our hotels that tested in the middle of June. Again, all contact tracing has been done and nothing further has come out of that. She has pledged going forward that the moment the COVID-19 testing group finds it, they will communicate with her and then she'll communicate with us. So those 2 individuals over the last month have been identified on the island, but nothing has come about it after contact tracing. So unfortunately, there is a cost associated with the office visit, but the testing itself is free.
Right. Thank you. 'Cause I just wanted to get that clarified, Jeff. We heard that in the meeting. I just wanted to make sure that they knew, the businesses knew what was coming, what was up. Is there any other update you would like to share with us on that? I mean, I saw your video today and that was great. Our community certainly appreciates you putting those together. Unless there's anything else.
We did get a couple questions from the public. If you'd give me a second, I can answer them while we're on this. So we talked about the COVID positive results and any active cases, which are none on the island. The protocol for testing is you call our front desk and you can request COVID testing. If any employer would like to do more than 5 individuals, we'll set aside a specific time for those employees. We send them out documents to pre-register patients so it goes seamlessly when they come to the office. Anything beyond that, we can arrange separate times. If you have symptoms, call the front office. We'll arrange for you to come through the ambulance bay doors directly into our segregated room that we have dedicated for COVID testing only. There are antibody tests that have always been available. Still, the FDA has approved them, but the medical community is very dubious on whether or not they have much value in this particular scenario, but we're happy to have that conversation. And part of that office visit is often trying to identify what is it you're trying to achieve, what is it that you'd like to know, and make sure we have the right test, the best test for that individual's particular needs. And as a result, in that last one, the tests themselves are compensated by the state.
Thank you, Tom.
That was it, I think, on the topic. Anybody have any questions for Tom? Oh, Ken's back. Okay. Hi, Ken.
Thank you. Martha, do you have something?
Yeah, I just had a clarification. Am I understanding correctly that we've gone back to quarantining from certain states?
Yes, that's correct.
I think given what we've discovered over the past couple of weeks of how little people know what's going on in Rhode Island who are coming into Rhode Island, it would behoove us to make as much of that available as possible. I don't think there are many states in our area, Maryland and Florida. I think the rest of them were, and I know Florida's not in our area. People come here from there. Beyond, out west and such. But that's something that I think everybody should really keep an eye on because it does seem to be a very moving target. Once again, in many ways, lots of people had hoped things were going to be stabilizing and that they're going the other direction.
Yeah, thank you, Martha. You're right. There's, they're very. I don't see any that are in our immediate vicinity. Of the ones that were listed with the higher tests, they're all out west or down south or whatever. So.
Well, we do get people from DC, and that could be Maryland. Only one.
Maryland isn't one of the ones.
It was on the list I looked up this afternoon. Maryland, and I think I can't remember the other one.
Okay, well, I guess it's a moving target then. Thank you.
Yeah, that's really the point. That has to be, just keep on top of it because it changes every day, and what was true, a week ago is not true right now. And I think again we keep saying this, but people go into vacation mode and just aren't paying attention.
Right. Good point. Thank you. Anything further anyone wants to discuss on this particular item on the agenda? Hearing none, we'll move on to the next item. Next item is to discuss and act on a possible amendment to the Emergency Ordinance 3 of the Town of Shoreham adopted June 24th, 2020, masks pertaining to the COVID-19 pandemic. Was this put on for a specific reason for someone's request on the council? Does anyone know? Molly, can you enlighten me as to why this was on separate from the other one?
Yes, both ordinances are in effect right now. And the request was to have both the ordinances on the agenda for possible amendment.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right.
Isn't one wrapped into the other? Are they separate ordinances now?
Yes.
Yeah, the one on the 24th, the one on titled masks.
Okay. I did have a question. I don't know where this fits anywhere. It's a comment and a question. It kind of wraps back to the discussion that was going on earlier. It sounds again like kind of what I feared from the get-go, that for all the state talking about support, we fundamentally are on our own, and not only are we on our own, they're relying upon businesses to take care of everything. And do we have plans from establishments that might be having big events this coming weekend?
Do we have plans?
Have been plans and filed with the police department or with upstate, or for a big bonfire gathering on the beach, for example?
I believe that at least one establishment has been in contact with it. My indications are that one establishment has been in contact with the Department of Commerce and with plans for what they're planning on, how they're planning on carrying that out.
Okay.
I can't answer the question on whether or not the police department has been in contact with them, though.
Can we check on that? Because I think everybody's concerned it's going to be a nightmare. It may well not be, but let's be sure.
Okay, I know, Jim, you've been in contact with some management on that, right, Jim?
Yeah, I have, and I'm not sure if we're talking about the same thing. I would.
Sure we are.
In general, individual businesses are required required to put a plan together with DVR if what they're planning is outside of the existing requirements. If it's not, then they're not. And both the police department and I have had conversations about a planned event this weekend at one of the businesses, and we'll continue to have that conversation, but nothing so far is outside of the requirements as set up by the state of Rhode Island.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Next item on the agenda will be discuss and act on a town council meeting schedule. This is, we have a notice from Molly. Revised town council calendar. Now that land use is resuming planning, zoning, and HDC meetings, there'll be a conflict with the Zoom license on the second and fourth Wednesdays if the council continues to meet every Wednesday. We both use the enterprise license. Also, if the council goes into closed session, I need both enterprise and pro licenses. By this memo, Molly is asking the town council to set a meeting schedule going forward that avoids conflict with the land use meetings. And we have in your packet, we have the calendar for the rest of the year showing when those meetings are, and indicating the council meetings would be the first Monday and the third Wednesday of the month. Any questions or comments?
Just to clarify, Ken.
Go ahead, Andre.
So, yeah, okay. No, I'm looking at July and August, and we will have a meeting on the 6th, the 15th of July. So two meetings in July, the 6th, the 15th. And following the 15th of July, our next meeting after that will be the 3rd of August. Is that correct? Except for a financial town meeting around July 27th?
Yes.
I'm fine with the schedule. I mean, things may come up we need to talk to in the COVID world, but we can always schedule a meeting if we need to, right?
We can, as long as we don't overlap with one of the other boards.
Right, and those are marked on this schedule, the blue and the yellow. Yep. Okay.
Molly for getting this together.
I got that. Thank you.
I'll make a motion to amend the town council meeting schedule to move our meetings basically to the first Monday and the third Wednesday of the months, except for those dates that are indicated on the revised schedule.
Seconded
by Andre. Any further discussion?
You have a question.
Go ahead, Martha.
Is there any, has there been any further discussion about, with the numbers increasing, of doing a hybrid sort of meeting where the actual governing body is in the room and it's zoomed out to the public?
Can you clarify on that? I'm a little unclear as to what you're asking. It's Andre.
About if, how we can structure it so, for example, the council, which I guess is probably the smallest of these bodies, can meet in person, because we can do it with spacing in that room, and have the interaction with the public still be via Zoom, but we all be on basically one camera, I guess it would be.
Yeah, that would have to be the case because we've experimented with using the computers and that's a nightmare.
It didn't work. You know, I talked to Michelle, and she said, I was just happened to be in the building at the same time she was, and she said that it was just a matter of our figuring out how to arrange it. It wasn't a technological difficulty.
Okay,
we probably want to keep that up. I mean, I think we probably don't want to try doing that quite yet, but I think we should try have an ultimate end game of getting back to actually meeting. in
Yeah,
person.
yeah, I'd like to do it as soon as it's safe to do that. Currently, with the mask ordinance and with masks in place, I find that very, very disenfranchising. I have a lot of trouble understanding people talking through masks
Yeah.
in the meeting situation. So, any further comments or questions? All those in favor, Andre,
Aye.
Ben, Chris,
Aye.
Martha?
Aye.
I'll make a motion to approve. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you. Thank you, Molly, for putting this together for us. Next item on the agenda is just to receive correspondence. Receive correspondence from notice to the town of New Shoreham as property owner for planning board master plan stage application for public hearing Phelan Plat 10 lots 19-1 and 23-1. Notified that the above noted master plan stage application has been scheduled for a public informational meeting for the planning board town of Shoreham Wednesday, July 8th at 5 p.m. for applicant's presentation on the proposed major subdivision of the property to the benefit of the planning board and the public. Planning board shall allow oral and written comment of the general public. The subdivisions being sought to combine lot 19-1 and lot 23-1 and to create a total of 4 lots, one of which contains the applicant's homes. Planning board meeting is to be held virtually on Zoom pursuant to Rhode Island General Executive Order 2025. This is just basically acknowledgement of correspondence to the council and to the town. Next item, Jim, we need to go into closed session on the last 2 items, or are we not ready for that yet?
No, we don't.
We're not, okay. So then we've completed the agenda. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that in a second. I just had a question about these notices. Has the town ever actually sent a letter in support or denying any of these notices from as an abutter? Like we just got correspondence. Are they asking for a comment from on behalf of the town, or has the town has the council ever, Martha? Maybe you can answer this. Okay. Has the council ever responded to one of these with a yeah, it's a great idea, or no, we don't like that idea, or?
Go ahead, Martha.
Well, for one thing, the notice of a hearing is to inform the abutters. It's not to poll the neighborhood. That's not what the purpose is. The only time, and I don't remember, it was a long time ago, that the council ever got involved in anything like this. If there was something, it may have only happened once. I think we had to get a separate lawyer on something, and I honestly don't remember what it was. It was so very, very long ago. Generally speaking, the town does not.
Well, we've taken action. I'm sorry, we've taken action when we've gotten notice from other boards from like CRMC and things like that. We've taken action and made statements when we've got notification in a similar fashion, not from local, but from other state boards.
Thanks for clarifying that. It was just a,
Okay.
And I'll second your motion to, Chris.
Okay, go ahead, Chris.
Did we have anything from Molly? Any anything, any emails people were supposed to email in? Any questions about anything? We didn't hear from Molly yet during the whole meeting.
Molly?
Just double checking. I got an email from someone looking for a copy of the current budget, but no comments during the meeting.
Thank you.
We have a motion on the table, currently unseconded.
It's seconded.
Seconded.
Thank you. Seconded by Andre. Any further discussion? All those, Chris, you have your hand raised again?
No.
All those in favor, Andre?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Ben? Aye. Martha?
Aye.
I vote in the affirmative. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Be safe and have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank
you
you.
too.
As well.